Well, that movie,
cardboard
Revenge of the
boxes.
Nerds, we were talking about in the green room, it was for me, by my perception, it was the very slow beginning to what we have today, which is just nerd domination. The word nerd almost means nothing, because what is a nerd when nerds are captains of industry and running the government and we own everything
that's really true.
And we are the sought after demographic and it's like and I start to worry, should I say we, because I'm worried I'll get called out on not being an authentic nerd, and yet everyone's a fucking nerd. It goes back to that pivot point. I always associate it with that movie, that because it put a label on it and said absolutely from here on out, if you see somebody who's weird in a movie, all those people that we make fun of in the movies when they come through and they go, oh look, it's Purple Derper. From now on, you have to understand that person is the hero of their own story. You're not allowed to just give them a wedgie and call that a joke anymore.
Yeah.
You could do that in Meatballs. You could do that in leading up to that, the preppies could be the heroes.
In my memory, every movie before that was the joke. Every movie after that, you weren't allowed to do that. You could, like the jocks were the good guys until that movie.
You're right. Yes.
But you were saying in the green room, this fascinates me, that movie was incredibly unsuccessful critically.
Critically, it was a disaster. They hated us. They just hated us. And I think, at the time we were sort of consoling ourselves by saying things like, well, all critics are self-loathing nerds. And that's the reason. They see too much of themselves.
But the director, you said, who I think, I'm going to watch Revenge of the Nerds again, see if it holds up. I do know, I want to talk about Better Off Dead in a second. I have watched Better Off Dead since Bobcat was on here, and we talked about Savage Steve Holland. And I ran home and watched Better Off Dead again, and fuck, it holds the hell up. And it's such an important film. And also, Savage Steve, then he just kind of trickled away. And I want to have him as a guest on here and talk about that, because the perceptions of people who are in the Midwest watching this stuff on HBO, Select TV, VHS tapes that they run into disintegration, which Revenge of the Nerds is one of them. Our perception is cultural efficacy. It's just that, this must be an amazingly influential and successful film, and it is for us, but in some strange emerald city from which it's coming, people are being rewarded and punished on different scales. And Jeff Canoe, who directed Revenge of the Nerds, went on to direct Gotcha, you said. I'm acting like I'm an expert. I pumped you for this information.
Yeah.
He went on to direct Gotcha, which is the paintball
I love
exploitation movie.
I remember everything about that movie.
Do you really?
Oh, yeah, I saw it in the theater with my mom. It's the best. And I went, and there were those little tracer disc guns that they shot little plastic discs that flew pretty well. And I just played Gotcha all the time. So it was I was going around and playing like a fake assassin and being like a spy with my Gotcha gun.
Yes, I am a spy. Sorry, that's from the commercial. And then he kind of and then he sort of.
Well, this is a good question to ask of him as well. But he was somebody who, if it had not been for Jeff Canoe, we wouldn't have had the freedom to. That movie wouldn't have had the freedom to develop the way it did and come out the way it did. He was incredibly brilliant at creating an environment in which writers and actors and even producers were involved. He was casting the producers in tiny roles in Revenge of the Nerds and sort of keeping them in the group.
And he had this collaborative writing process.
It was very, very collaborative. And he brought all of us out a week early before shooting, putting us all up in a hotel with the writers and the producers and so on. And we would just sit in the hotel all day. We'd be hanging out at the pool, and then they would call you in, and you would go in, and you would talk about who Booger was. And you had to write everything down. I went back to my room and I did my old acting school job of, writing down my biography of Booger. I did this.
What is Booger's biography?
That was really funny because what wound up happening was, last year, I was going through a trunk of stuff and I found this amazing notebook, which I still have, because I was serious, this was an acting thing that you did when you're trained the way I was trained. And I had this booklet, and it's got the bios of all of the characters I played in those early movies up to about 87. And so I'm looking at it, this text, And I go into it and I find Booger's biography. And I'm reading what I wrote in 1984 as to who I thought Booger was.
God damn it, I would have told you to bring that.
I can tell you right now, it was me. It was totally me.
I was going to ask you, how much of Booger was on the page, on the script before?
There was very little. There was almost none.
Like, was there a breakdown for the character that said, Booger comes in and he
fact,
looks like... And he...
I didn't audition for Booger. I auditioned for Gilbert,
Oh, really?
Anthony's part.
Yeah.
Which is what I thought I was reading for. So, that's great. I'm reading for, great. I'm working with Bobby Carradine. That's fabulous. And then it turned out that I was actually auditioning for a part that was too small and too disgusting to audition people. You couldn't use Booger. I mean, what is it going to be? It's like, I think the douchebag line, my mother's old douchebag, but that's back in Ohio. That was like the only line that had a beginning and an end. For Booger. It was mainly nose picking and belching.
Because your character was only nerdy in the sense that you were just completely...
He wasn't nerdy at all.
You were a sociopath. You were a misfit.
Exactly. Booger's only reason for existence is to show how saint-like these other nerds are.
Yeah.
Well,
you just believe in them so much. Like, this guy is the best.
Well, I have another...
What they do is he gets thrown out. I mean, it's sort of a traditional thing. He gets thrown into the outer darkness with them.
Right.
And they don't even think about it. They just say, you come with us.
That's okay. So this is an important thing because you mentioned something. You and I are similar age, same generation, and then there's a new generation. If you look at Revenge of the Nerds through current eyes, I mean, I can, without rewatching it, I will tell you the fucking unacceptable red flags that are going to come up. There is absolutely non-consensual sex that converts a woman from being a bad guy to a good guy because she lets the nerd disguise himself, and then the shit's like, oh, you're so good at cunnilingus.
It's just horrible.
Is it Darth Vader too?
Yeah. By our modern definitions, there's racism, there's homophobia, there's a million crimes that we've covered as we've progressed. Like now, you look back 30 years and it's like,
really true.
The important kind of socio-political, like subversive element, though, and that's where Booger comes in, is the idea that was the first time in my consciousness that we put a word on nerd, but the whole idea of the movie that was demonstrated not just in that final monologue, we're all nerds, and then even the beautiful people are saying, I'm a nerd too, but more importantly, throughout the first and second act, this creeping realization that the word nerd has no boundary except that you are the other, which means that if you smoke weed, you're a nerd, which means that if you're a which means that and what is the common hub? It is being divested of your right to prejudice, because there is a gay man within the nerds,
a gay
and
black man.
He is not immediately sussed out for his aberration. He is ignored. He is welcomed, and
it's never questioned. And when we go to UN Jefferson, because we want the lambda 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 to support us, we say that there will be no prejudice, which we think will get us in with him, Bernie Casey. There won't be any prejudice according to race or creed. And Larry B., who plays Lamar, says, or sexual orientation, which is like a joke that would work now.
Right.
Yeah. If you weren't, if you were doing that kind of a parody on that sort of thing.
Right.
So, yeah, it was, they meant it as a parable for anti-Semitism. That's what the writers meant.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Listen, I just found that out about Superman. I remember hating that and then learning that two Jewish kids created it. And...
It was the same thing. And they did that, the burning nerds on the lawn and all of that. They were going into these, which were at the time, for people our age, they were these strong, cultural flags of something that had been going on in the 60s and the 70s that we were supposedly coming out of now, which, of course, we haven't. But that was the idea.